Welcome back to this special chat with Professor Abhijit Banerjee. He's perhaps the last word on anything related to poor economics. That's incidentally the name of his book as well. He's the Ford Foundation professor who's now visiting on an Exim Bank invitation. Well, Professor Banerjee, let's speak about inflation targeting. You know, you spoke, when we spoke about farm problems, you did say that we are, keeping the farmer poor because we want our consumers to be fed. But there are more poor consumers than there are rich farmers. So isn't inflation targeting itself a good goal to have?
Well, the question is, what's the incidence, right? So, yes, we have many poor consumers. On the other hand, if you think of one person who sells sugarcane, and their price of sugarcane is 50% below what it could be, that's a huge effect on me. If I pay 50% more for sugar and I buy 2 kilos of sugar a month, it's an effect, but it's not the same magnitude. So I think one should be, I don't think one should see these as being symmetrical.
Okay. We were under double-digit inflation or near double-digit for about 4-5 years, and hence the call for a 4% inflation was extremely attractive because obviously inflation hurts the poor more. Isn't that a valuable goal to have?
It may be a valuable goal to have, but then we need to be willing to compensate the people who pay for it. If the farmers are getting us, so if oil prices go up, and as a result we have to reduce inflation, and we do it by reducing farm prices by basically banning exports, then the farmers are paying for our inflation target. I don't think. So the right way to think about it is that the farmers deserve compensation for what they're delivering to the rest of the economy. We want stable inflation at 4%. Farmers are going to sometimes get a big hit. So let's think of a mechanism for compensating them. Why should they be one? We have an aspiration for protecting our poor, but the farmers are usually poor as well. Why should they be the people who pay for it?
Okay, fair point. There is a fear that, there was a fear until recently, that for the universal basic income, the government will target the Reserve Bank's reserves. Do you fear, is that fear now out of the way because there is a committee appointed to study the capital reserves? Or do you think that will be the basis on which all the promises will be made?
Well, I think that in particular before the election, it's quite easy to make promises based on what clearly will be a long-term negotiation. So it's very easy to say, if you bring us back to power, we will use this money in the future, because it won't be now. So I see it as being a very easy option for the government. Once we get to this point, they don't actually have to deliver. They just have to say it. And then, there will be other promises that have not been delivered on, so why not this one?
Okay. So there will be political pressure on the committee in that case?
Yes, surely. They are very good people in the committee, so if anybody can resist pressure, and these are the people. So I think it's fair to say the government has appointed a committee of very distinguished people.
Okay, well, let's hope we shouldn't be prejudging the government or the committee in this case. But let me come to other policies that the government has announced. Since you have, I read only the foreword of Poor Economics, but yours is a bottom-up study of various pro-poor programs or poverty alleviation programs that have succeeded. How would you look at Ayushman Bharat? Does it have the rudiments of success?
So I think it has two answers to that question. One answer is that there's a real problem they're trying to solve. The real problem is not a problem of health. It's a problem of finance. It's a problem of people getting hit with 5 lakh costs when they take their family member for cancer surgery, and that's the problem it's trying to solve. So it's not an insane thing to do. The question is whether that's going to solve our health problems, which I don't think it will, because health is only weakly related to tertiary health care. Most of it comes from not getting your NCDs early. exercising, not
NCDs would be
non-communicable diseases early. Your diabetes, your blood pressure. This is where we have an epidemic.
Lifestyle problems.
Lifestyle problems. We have an epidemic of that coming up. Partly because we are aging as a population, partly because we have very undesirable lifestyle, partly because our cities are extremely polluted. All of these things contribute to that. So we have a massive problem there, which is going to need to be dealt with, and this is not going to solve that. So that's one answer. But it is solving a real problem. The second part of the answer is that the experience of, for example, RSBY, which is trying to do something on a much less grand scale,
yes,
was that in some states, like in Rajasthan, there was so much fraud that it had to be shut down. So unless we have a clear mechanism for dealing with fraud, a very clear understanding of how to do it, this is an extremely fraught thing to do. So I think the homework that could have been done has not yet been done. Maybe it will be done when over time, and maybe there's enough, the government will basically not let the scheme expand very much right now to avoid that, but that's the issue.
Okay. Well, actually, let me put the question to you more positively. If you were, engaged by the BJP to advise them as to what should they do in terms of a sensible poverty alleviation program. And poverty alleviation is a vote catcher, which is good. Democracy will work for the poor in that case. What would you advise them?
It's a good question. I do think that not doing some of the things, like I was saying, the entire treatment of the agricultural sector has been, I think, anti-poor. I think that the fact that NREGA has become more and more stultified is not desirable. I think
it should have been used better.
It should be used better. It needs to be used better, and it's become more and more. First, the funding is restricted. Second, it's not very responsive to conditions. So local conditions, one thing it could do is say, look, you're in this particular district, if there's a drought, we'll raise the wages or something. So it's a very bureaucratic scheme which with lots of lags. Yeah. So to get the money, I have to apply 6 months ahead of time or something. So the whole thing is not a very flexible response. So I don't think we need to. I think if I were advising them, and I believe they would listen to me, I would say do which I don't. I would say don't introduce new schemes.
Yes.
Get the current schemes that they are there. They're not crazy. Get them to work better. And I think people have benefited from NREGA. They have benefited from the PDS. And I think those are schemes that would. I think they would be both. If they were well implemented, I think they would be politically popular and also useful for the poor. So
okay. What's your sense about the poverty programs promised so far in the last 70 years or even the last 50 years? It is very tempting to be cynical and say most of them are vote catchers and have delivered nothing.
It's not true. That's partly what I tried to say. I think the evidence suggests that NREGA, when it's well implemented, has substantial poverty effects. And I would say that the other evidence is the building of the rural roads seems to have had, this is a NDA, very much an NDA program, yes. Has, I think, been beneficial, that people have benefited from the fact that they can exit from the village. You can see that basically the first order fact is that the fraction of farm income in the incomes of the poor is falling steeply. So even the very poor who have some land and who call themselves farmers are not actually getting a majority of the income from agriculture. They're getting the majority income from their one son who happens to be, he doesn't live in Bhagalpur, he lives in Surat, and he works there in construction, and he sends money back, and that's the majority of the earnings. So it has I think the first order...
It has improved labor mobility.
Labor mobility has been a huge part of the poverty decline has come from this
the Pradhan Mantri Sadak Yojana.
Well, I don't know whether just the the trains, the whole mobility, and the fact that there is still, we're still open to having, for people from Bihar come and settle in Maharashtra despite some political pressures. That's very important. And if that stops, we will suddenly have a crisis, because the poverty is concentrated in UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh.
If that is true, then growth is the best palliative, isn't it? Growth is the best alleviator of poverty. We should be concentrating on getting that right.
Well, two parts to that. One is, I don't know that we know why we grow. Okay. I think we've been growing despite doing most things wrong.
Okay.
And so I don't know that we can change the growth rate. I don't think we have done very much. We don't know when growth rate goes up. But
we are still delivering 7%, irrespective of coalitions.
I've said many times that this is one of the great mysteries of our times. And I can give you a story for why it happens. I think we started from... We have lots of talented entrepreneurs and lots of inefficiency. So that combination means that if some product is not being delivered, somebody comes up with it. And we have lots of entrepreneurial people, lots of inefficiency, lots of opportunities. Inefficiency is the flip side of inefficiency, is opportunity. So I do think that we are, but I don't think the government has done much other than, I think, remove the early liberalization was an extremely important thing to do, but after that I don't think that there is a huge amount that the government has done one way or the other. I think there are things that incrementally it does, like I think the debt tribunals in the long run might be very useful, because maybe the credit sector, which is extremely inept, will become more efficient, etc. But I don't think there is a huge amount that the government is doing in any given year that has consequences for our growth rate. I think we can all take credit for it, but I don't know that so that's part of the answer. Part of the answer is yes, maybe, but I don't know how to make growth happen. What I know we know how to do much better is if we did a program like NREGA that has direct consequences for rural wages, which go up, and people's earnings that go up, and those are big effects. And to do it through growth is, first, our cities will collapse. If we had everybody in UP move to Bombay, you really will have a problem. So I do think we need to think of mechanisms which are not involved they don't involve everybody moving to Bombay and Surat.
Do you think that 2019 looks like a better year for the world, for India, just as a macroeconomist as well?
No. I think it looks... we're getting into tough waters. Chinese growth is slowing, and US growth probably has hit its peak. So the drivers of world growth are kind of, those are the big drivers. Europe seems to be in its own mess, so I don't see where the dynamism comes from. Okay,
so in all our political problems, we are going to probably tackle a slightly tougher global challenge as well. A pleasure speaking with you, Professor Banerjee. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That was great.